But that's Howie Roseman being Howie Roseman. He likes to be aggressive. When a team is good, he is going to try and add pieces that can help them win right away. And good morning, Birds Nation. Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365 with your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. J-Mac, the countdown is on to the NFL trade deadline. Now less than 8 hours away. Want to kick around a couple of rumors with you. With the Phillies being rained out last night, it gave us the opportunity to watch Monday Night Football, but truth be told, I was kind of disappointed. I thought the Bengals were a Super Bowl contender again. They looked like anything but, and the way the Browns used at least one player last night, it makes you question whether he will be on the trade block for today. What did you do with your bad self after you left the show here on Birds 365?
Yeah, watched a little bit of Monday Night Football, as you mentioned. Watched a little bit of Monday Night's Raw, as I'm apt to do. I tend to toggle back and forth, but you bring up the Bengals. I mean, that to me, I'm with you. I think that's a pretty good football team. Obviously, a good young quarterback. They made the Super Bowl last season. A lot of positive things, but that's another indication of why the Eagles are so good. Everybody has these games. Everybody in this league has these games, except one team so far. So when you look at the schedule and say they should beat this team, they should beat that team, well, trust me, people in Cincinnati are saying, well, the Bengals are going to beat this struggling Browns team with no Deshaun Watson. And look what happens. That's another indication of how good this Eagles team has been.
The undefeated Philadelphia Eagles, exactly right. And it lends a little credence to, as much as we appreciate A.J. Brown and the big day he had yesterday, and I here on the show said he might be the biggest acquisition during this past offseason of any in a league where it's all dominated the conversation and the belief that you only go as far as your quarterback takes you. Oh, look what A.J. Brown's doing in Philadelphia. Jamar Chase, you can make an argument for MVP because the week before with Chase in the lineup, 35 points in the first half, 350 yards passing for Burrow. Who you take out Jamar Chase? The offense didn't even look pedestrian last night for the Bengals. So that too is also telling for a Philadelphia Eagle guy.
And that's another thing. You got to be, injuries in this league, man. One player can turn things in a drastic direction. And, Jordan Davis is the first, and he doesn't play a lot. And I'm not trying to compare him to Jamar Chase out in Cincinnati, who's, the crux of their playmakers, but still important for what he does in his role with the Eagles. And we're going to have to see how they handle him. Nick Sirianni won't admit. He did admit he's probably not going to play Thursday, but he wouldn't admit anything much further than that. He's going to be out for a couple weeks. And, I think the key is if they put him on injured reserve, it's 4 games. If they don't, they'll think he has a chance to get back a little bit quicker. But either way, he's going to miss a couple games at the bare minimum. And it's a big deal. I've been talking about it. It's a domino thing. It's a little bit esoteric, but it affects things in a lot of ways.
You're right. It's as much the fact that Jordan makes the plays that he makes in the amount of snaps that he plays, but it's the fact that it probably is going to change their overall philosophy on how they align across the front of the defensive line. Will they play 5 down? If they do, how are they going to line? Is it going to be a different type of 5 down defensive lineman? You're right. Perfectly described as a domino effect because you get a chance to talk to Mr. Gannon today. I think he'll do a Nick Sirianni and play his cards very close to the vest. I don't think he'll give you any actual actionable intel, but I know you guys will ask for it. And that is the first pretty significant injury because they've had guys, Clay's been out of games, Slay's been out of games. They've had guys get hurt in game, but a guy who's going to miss multiple games going forward, this is probably the biggest injury that the Eagles have had all year. All right, as I said, John, we're down to 7 hours and change before the trade deadline. We know Howie Roseman made the deal. Last week they had Robert Quinn. He did play week 1. They got him right in there and they played. Didn't really do anything. Didn't come up with any tackles or any significant pressures. But he did get in and got some action, which is a good sign going forward for the rest of the year. It did cut into we speculated correctly. The guy who was going to be affected was probably Brandon Graham more than anyone else. And Graham's snaps were limited this past week in the game. Now, he had a hamstring issue before the game, so I don't know how much that cut into his time, but it is something that's worth monitoring. Number of snaps for BG, who I don't see how you can possibly complain about the way that he's played. He's come back, had a phenomenal return year off the big injury last year. But that's Howie Roseman being Howie Roseman. He likes to be aggressive. When a team is good, he is going to try and add pieces that can help them win right away. He's got 7+ hours to get something else done and add another piece to the Eagles. What piece do you think that's going to be, J-Mac?
Running back, I think, is still most likely, even though I don't necessarily agree with that. That seems to be the position that Howie thinks improvement needs to be made. And maybe it comes down to more than that is, a lot of times we just assume, what you need is available. Maybe he's not comfortable with any of the backup safeties. Nobody's looking to trade cornerbacks who can play. So, maybe that player's just not available. Running backs, because of the position, because of people in the way they look at it, not only can you get good ones, you can get good ones of value. So maybe it has to do with more of that. So you've heard the names in Kareem Hunt and David Montgomery, and the most interesting one to me that's popped up in recently is Nyhiem Hines, because this coaching staff loves him from their time in Indianapolis, and I can't help but think that comes from the Eagles, almost Nyheim Hines, and the fact that the rumor popped out because the Eagles want him to be available. And that would be I would think, the perfect fit for what they're looking for, what they want. And then would come Hunt. And it was interesting. I think it was Ralph Bacchiana, who you probably know, was a New York-based writer.
Oh, yes.
For many years. Very good. He had mentioned the Eagles' interest in Kareem Hunt, which makes sense. But he said he's probably available for a 4th-round pick, which he probably is. But the Eagles don't have a 4th-round pick, at least until 2024. So it's tough to get teams to say, hey, we'll give you a 4th-round pick, but you got to wait an extra year. That's very, very tough to do. So they have some hurdles in the fact that they've already traded those mid-round picks, so they got to be a little bit more creative. And then the one potential move out, look, if somebody wants to give them a 3rd-round pick for Andre Dillard, I think they'll listen very, intently. But it would have to be a 3rd-round pick. And maybe player for player. Maybe that's how you get inventive. If you really want Kareem Hunt, Cleveland's got a very good offensive line, so I don't know if that's necessarily a fit. But you got to get inventive. You got to get inventive, and it's more difficult than people probably realize.
And when I tuned into the Monday night game last night, I was kind of surprised to see Kareem Hunt and not only playing, but actively included in the game plan last night, getting carries, getting the ball thrown to him out of the backfield. If Cleveland was really close to trading him, I think that he's got to be in bubble wrap last night. That if you think that you can get what you want in exchange for him, you don't want to run the risk that he's going to come up injured in that game last night. Now, he didn't. To the Browns' credit, they win the game. They at least technically stay in the mix as a divisional challenger in the AFC North. And Hunt went out, played well enough to, if someone had questions about whether he's worth what the other team is asking for, he looked pretty good to me last night, and he came back 100% healthy. So I give a tip of the cap to the Browns, even if I was surprised by it. They did put him somewhat at risk last night. Do you think Kareem Hunt gives the Eagles what they want. If they're putting an emphasis on ability to make the plays, catching the ball out of the backfield, he's pretty good at it. Is he? If both teams can agree on what the value should be, does he come in here and do what they need him to do?
Oh yeah, he's exactly what they want from a talent perspective. He's a very good running back. He's a starting level running back, but the reason he is where he is because of that off the field problem in Kansas City. People forget how good he was there. So that's one thing that you have to obviously get the all green from Jeffrey Lurie, so to speak. When you have some off the field issues you have to do with that are going to be drudged up again. You can bet about that in Philadelphia. But um, from a pure football perspective, yeah, he's really good. I mean, Eagles fans aren't going to like this, but you could argue he's a better running back than Miles Sanders. I would argue he's a better running back than Miles Sanders. So from a talent perspective, um, yeah, he's really good.
You think he's a better runner than Miles Sanders?
I think he's a better all-around player than Miles Sanders. Is how I would describe it. He's a very good runner, as you mentioned, very good pass receiver out of the backfield. I have to look more into his pass protection history. Most running backs aren't good at that in today's game, to be honest. But my guess is he's better at that because he'd almost have to be. But I would have to look more into that. He's a really good player. Like I said, I mean, he's behind Nick Chubb's at worst top three, top four in the NFL. And he might be higher than that. He could start on the vast majority of teams in the NFL. Um, he's a very good player. He's exactly what the Eagles are looking for. It would create the Ajayi sort of blunt dynamic, although these two would be better, to be honest, than those two were. Where, if one gets hot, you play him. If the other one gets hot, you play him, and you ride whoever gets hot at the right time. And it would create a lot of comfort for the coaching staff. I would say that. Now, how do you get there? I don't know how you get there because I don't want to give up a third round pick for him because I don't think, Howie's good with the valuation stuff I always talk about. That's a little bit too much. You've already given up, you got a big donut hole, as I said, in the middle rounds of the draft. I don't want to give that up. And you don't have a fourth round pick. So how do you get them? It might have to be a conditional 4 that turns into a 3. And I wouldn't necessarily even have a problem with that. But I just don't want to say, here's the third round pick. Because I don't think they have to. But if you don't have a fourth round pick, how do you get a fourth round pick?
Oh, yeah. Trade Andre Dillard, as you mentioned, either on a 1-for-1 deal or you make the deal for Dillard and then you turn around and use that pick in a swap. I just looked it up quick. I didn't think he was having as good a year playing behind Nick Chubb. He's usually a 4+ yard per carry guy, was upwards of 4.9 last year. Again, used significantly less because Chubb certainly was their number 1 back and he was their number 2 back. But Kareem's down to 4 yards per carry, which isn't the neighborhood that Miles Sanders is in. Better catching ball out of the backfield. No argument there. He's been good at it since his Kansas City days into what he's done for the Browns. And we all know Miles has gone progressively backwards in his production as a pass receiver coming out of the backfield. But I'll stand by. I think Miles Sanders is a better runner than is Kareem Hunt. And if the Eagles go there, my only question will be, I thought Howie didn't value running backs. We like to talk about what the Eagles value, what the league values. If they don't value the running back, then why can't you get him for a 4th? All of a sudden, a guy worth the 3rd, who isn't even a starting back for his team, is the value of running backs going up across the league, or is just the value that Howie Roseman is putting on it going up at this time?
Well, no, I think there's running back as a position. There's 2 ways it kind of goes, and the fact that you don't think about them, you don't care about them until you need them. I talk about everything about this league. I talk about it with you going back in the offseason training camp. It's all passing game, passing game, passing game, passing game. And then, you show up in January and you want to run the football and you say, hey, go run the football, guys. Now, the good thing for the Eagles is they have that offensive line and they can do it. Most teams can't do it. But yeah, when we talk about the value of the position, we talk about like Kareem Hunt in a different era would be worth a second round pick. That's what I'm talking about. Like the whole league is sort of, I don't want to use the word collusion because they'll get in trouble. And it's not collusion from the nefarious sense, but groupthink is probably the better phrase. The groupthink around the NFL is, okay, you can, walk down the street and pick up a rock and you're going to find a competent running back. So the value of those guys has dropped. If you look at the best running backs, and I mentioned one of them in Nick Chubb, but Derrick Henry is the most notable in recent years, and obviously Jonathan Taylor, certainly last season, was just unbelievable. Those guys have an incredible impact on games and game plans, but they still don't have the value of what they produce because the league has this group thing. And that's what I mean. Doesn't mean they're not good players. Doesn't mean they're not important. Doesn't mean people don't want them, but they don't have the value of other positions when they talk about assets, when they go all Sam Hinkie on you and they talk about assets and they treat people like, commodities. It doesn't have the same value as a lot of other positions.
Well, Kareem Hunt is a backup running back. Granted, he'd be a starter on a whole bunch of teams in the NFL, but the team he's on, he's actually the backup running back, and he was a third-round draft pick. If he's still holding third-round value as a backup running back who was taken in the third round several years ago, that's not bad value. He's holding his value, as a matter of fact, compared to other backs around the league.
Well, he had obviously outperformed his third-round label. He came in as a rookie and dominated pretty much for Kansas City and proved he sort of outplayed that third-round tag. Smaller school, not as in, that plays into it. And then he had the issues, as I said, the off-the-field issues, and that's why he was out of Kansas City, not because he wasn't a good player. And, a lot of people, if you go back to that, a lot of people were saying at the time the Eagles should take a flyer on him, because he's going to come back at some point. He's going to be a really good player again. And it's happened, but people don't realize it as much because he plays behind Nick Chubb and they have that 1-2 punch. And there's some hidden value there if you can get him. There's some hidden value, but I would focus more on Nyhiem Hines than Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt. I think that's a guy. We see it with Zach Pascal. I mean, when Nick has his guys, Nick has his guys, and I guarantee you he's doing the Nick Sirianni pounding on the table. If he's available, as that rumor said, the pounding is happening. Loves him.
But as the Colts GM is I don't think he's a dominant GM. He's not going to be able to rake Howie Roseman over the coals, but he's going to try, because if he knows that Nick Sirianni is very motivated.
Well, that guy's got a great reputation. Hasn't lived up to it, but Chris Ballard, people around the league swear by him.
And I get that his reputation is what it is, and then there are the results, and the results haven't matched Ballard's reputation. Is the point I'm trying to make. Jody McDonald with John McMullen. Oh, I see our first guest in the waiting window. We will be joined by Mr. Ed Kratz. He's going to jump in with us next here on a undefeated Tuesday edition of Birds 365.